Hi guys, so this video will cover the years from 661 to 733, and sort of the title of this class would be the Umayyad Caliphate. Although Uthman had been a member of the Umayyad tribe who was caliph, he didn't establish unbroken succession of Umayyad rulers because Ali took over after him. So the first ruler of the Umayyad Caliphate is generally remembered to be Muawiyah. And you should probably remember him from the end of your last class and the end of the Sunni Shiite civil war. When Muawiyah takes control, he makes two big changes. The first of those is he institutes hereditary succession, which can be a key term for us. That just means that his son will inherit the throne after him. So there's no ambiguity about who the next caliph will be. A side benefit of this, although some people might say the primary benefit, is that the caliph will always be a member of the Umayyad tribe. He also moves the capital. The capital of the empire had been in Medina since the time of Muhammad, because that had been Muhammad's home since the Hijrah of 622. The capital is moved to Damascus. I think there are two important reasons that you should know for this. The first big advantage is you just get away from Ali's supporters. You get away from the Shia, who tend to be focused around Ali's hometown and Ali's second town of Mecca and Medina. So you move the capital up. But also at this point, if you look at a map, you'll see, and I think you can look at a map in your textbook on page 71 and see the expansion of the empire. Damascus is just a much more centralized location. And again, if the Mediterranean is the internet, Damascus just gives you a better connection to that. From Damascus, you can expand in two directions. You can expand sort of towards, well, I guess you can expand in three directions. You can expand to the east, and as you do that, you go outside of the realm of this class. You could expand to the north towards Constantinople into modern-day Turkey, or you could expand to the west across North Africa. And the empire has such great positive feedback loop, so much inertia, so much momentum, that it actually expands in all three directions at once. But the first place that we'd like to talk with you about is an expansion towards Constantinople. So there's the siege of Constantinople, which goes on for 5 years. I'd like to talk a little bit just about this word siege. In Bulgarian, it's obsada. The noun is siege. That's when you surround a city in order to starve the people, so that they'll give up. Until the invention of gunpowder, it's incredibly difficult to actually capture a city if the people haven't opened the doors to you, because they have big walls and they're throwing things at you. So there's a siege of Constantinople. And just one vocab term I'd add for you is that the verb in English for siege is to besiege. So there is a siege because the Arab forces besieged Constantinople. The siege does not work. Their navy is not strong enough to cut off both access through the Dardanelles and the Bosphorus. And so food is able to get in, because normally if you besieged a city for 5 years, obviously they would starve. So they try again and again and again, but they fail. So this actually really represents one of the first major setbacks that befalls the Islamic Empire. What this does do, though, is it pulls the Byzantine forces out of some of the provinces. And one of those provinces is Thrakia. And this allows a group of people to enter Thrakia for the first time. And these are the Bulgars. In the year 680, the Bulgars cross the Danube and come into the province of Thrakia. And led by Han Asparuch, they fight in the Battle of Ongal, and they defeat the Byzantines. Now, we know that the big date in Bulgarian history is 681. Because in 681, the peace treaty is signed with the Byzantines, and this makes official that the Bulgars are allowed to live in Bulgaria. But the Battle of Ongal in 680 is really the event that makes that possible. So even though 681 is something that you've heard for the last 16 years, I'd like to maybe suggest that 680 was actually slightly more important. All right, so great, we have the Bulgars now inside the bordering the Byzantine Empire, and we'll hear much more about them in subsequent classes. If we shift back to the Islamic Empire, there's just one caliph that you really, really need to know from this class. His name is Abdullah Malik. He ruled for 20 years, and I think I'm on pretty comfortable ground saying he was the greatest of the Umayyad caliphs. And there were three big things that Abdullah Malik did that we'd like you to know about. The first was that he minted coins. To mint coins is the act of actually pressing them. So he minted coins. He built a building called the Dome of the Rock. And his armies captured Carthage. All right, first of all, the minting of coins. There were coins in the Islamic world before this, but the significance of this is I think it tells us a lot about how powerful the caliphate was at this point. If you're going to make coins, there are three things that you have to have. First of all, you have to have a lot of gold, or a lot of silver, a lot of precious metals just to put in the coins. And so we can see how wealthy the caliphate had become. The second thing that you need is you need to have the trust of the people, because you're literally putting your face or your mark or your signature on the coins, guaranteeing that they are the weight that they are supposed to be, because you don't want to have to take out a scale and weigh the coins every single time. Actually, that weighing of coins, you can see here the ridges on the coin here. The reason why there are ridges on the coin, and this is 20 stertinki and is not made out of precious metal at all, but that's a holdover from when coins were made out of precious metal in order to stop you from shaving off a little bit from the sides, and then you shave off a little bit of this coin, and then pretty soon we're talking real money. They have these ridges to prevent you from shaving off around the edges. So that's just another feature that the Bulgarian National Bank has included to earn our trust. So you need to have the trust of the people, you need to have a lot of precious metal. But maybe most importantly is you have to be willing to take the money back. What does that mean? Well, when do governments take money back from people? They take money back from people in terms of taxes. And so when the government pays you with a coin for being in the military or for work that you've done, what they're also saying is, and I guarantee that coin is good enough to be used to pay me taxes. So the third thing that the minting of coins means is that the government is collecting taxes on a wide scale. And that's definitely true of the Islamic Caliphate, the Umayyad Caliphate at this point. The second thing we'd like to point out to you is that Abdullah Malik builds the Dome of the Rock. This is the point in the video, if we were good at editing, we'd include a picture of the Dome of the Rock. But because we're not, we're going to tell you, you can Google Dome of the Rock. There are photos of it because it still exists today. It's in Jerusalem. And I think it's fair to say that this is the third holiest site in Islam. First being Mecca, second being Medina, third being the Dome of the Rock. This is a shrine that represents the place where Muhammad ascended to heaven when he was when he met God. It wasn't when he died, it was when he was alive. Jibreel takes him from Mecca to Jerusalem, and then he climbs up the ladder to heaven. And one of the stories is that he negotiates with God over how many prayers there have to be. I think God says something like, you must pray 99 times per day, and Muhammad negotiates it down to 5. So the Dome of the Rock celebrates that. And the Dome of the Rock is very much in the news today because the Dome of the Rock is also on top of what Jewish people would call the Temple Mount, which was the site of the second temple. And so in Israel right now, there is great conflict about access to the Dome of the Rock and access to the temple. And this has been the cause of violence, which has flared up in just the last couple of weeks, actually. The third thing that Abdullah Malik's armies do is that they capture Carthage. And they do this in the year 698. The significance of this is that we use Carthage as kind of a bookmark for controlling the Mediterranean. there's some point when the Umayyad Caliphate takes control of the Mediterranean, when they are the dominant naval force in the Mediterranean, and they take that power away from the Byzantines. Where exactly that is would be hard to measure, but if you have to say a time, say 698 with the capture of Carthage, because at that time Carthage was the greatest naval city in the Western Mediterranean. So the capture of that ends up being hugely important. So please do know the three things that Abdullah Malik does. He mints coins, he builds the Dome of the Rock, so that's a symbol of Islamic power and prestige, and he captures Carthage, which gives the Umayyad Caliphate control over the internet. In 717 and 718, there's a second siege of Constantinople by Islamic armies. This siege is much better planned out, and we're going to talk about it in a subsequent class. For now, we just would like you to know that it was a great threat to the Byzantine Empire, that the Byzantine Empire was aided by the Bulgars in defending their city, and that the siege failed. So Constantinople remains a Byzantine city. And essentially, this second siege caps Islamic expansion in the east. They will not get across the Bosphorus. They will stay in, well, in Asia. And then the final date is a battle called the Battle of Tours, and we do not know whether it happened in 732 or 733, so no one can make you say what that date was. But there was a battle in Tours. Come with me. Carthage is here. That's 698. Over the ensuing decade, Islamic forces spread all the way across into what is modern-day Morocco, and in the year 711, they cross into Spain. They spread out through Spain, and then we lose track of them for a little bit. But then we know that in the year 732, or 33, they're fighting a battle against the Germanic tribe, the Franks, in Tours. That's a really long way from where we traditionally think of the Muslim world having been. So the Battle of Tours represents sort of the northernmost push of Islamic armies. This is actually another battle that we'll talk about in a subsequent class. But for now, very similar to the Second Siege of Constantinople, if you could just remember that the Battle of Tours was a victory for the Franks, that after that, the Islamic Empire, the Umayyad Caliphate, essentially sets up in modern-day Spain and Portugal. As you may remember from geography class, we have the Pyrenees Mountains here, which form a natural border between Spain and France. So they retreat down into the Iberian Peninsula. So our class ends then with the Islamic Empire being established in three ways. It's capped over here in the east by the Bosphorus and the Sea of Marmara. It's capped over here in the west by the Pyrenees, and it is, well, not in control of the whole, it is the dominant power in the Mediterranean. Thank you so much.